Bright Cutie. Every student matters.
Hello students. So now let's start our last topic here, that is legacy of the revolution. Now students, before this you have learned a lot about French Revolution, right? So you have learned about the French society, you learned about the beginning of the French Revolution, the causes for the French Revolution and the course of the French Revolution, as in what happened after it. So somewhere here between 1789 to 1799, we can say that the French Revolution and its repercussion is going on, right? And after that, Napoleon Bonaparte, he rises to become a military dictator and he gains power in France. Then he was seen as a modernizer there, right? So this is something that you're going to learn later on as well in your senior classes. But here students, let us now understand the legacy of the French Revolution, as in what one is going to endure from the French Revolution. What are the long-lasting impact of the French Revolution for the generations to come, right? So let us try to understand that. Now, whenever we are talking about French Revolution, if you remember, in the beginning of the chapter only, I told you that French Revolution changed the whole political and the social system in France, and it also had a long-lasting impact in Europe as well as other parts of the world, right? So here definitely we can say that in 19th century, many other parts of the world, they were also impacted by the French Revolution, 18th and the 19th century there. So the French Revolution, in simple terms, inspired the Germans, Italians, Austrians to overthrow their oppressive regime. Now talking about Europe specifically, we can see that the other neighboring regions of France. Now if you remember the proverb that I told you in the beginning, it was that when France sneezes, rest of Europe catches cold. That was given by Duke Metternich. Now we can see the importance of France in all of Europe here. Now these different regions, the neighboring regions nearby France, we see that the Germans, Germany, Italy, Austria, all these regions were also affected by the French Revolution. The ideas that were propagated by the French Revolution or spread by the French Revolution, and therefore they also decided to overthrow the oppressive regimes. Okay? Apart from this, in the beginning itself, you have learnt about three important terms, three important ideas that were spread during this revolution. And these three terms are, the first one is liberty, the second one is equality, and the third one is fraternity. Now, do you know the meanings of these words? Liberty, it is freedom of individual, right? Now, when we are talking about the term liberty here, we see that in France, people, they emphasized on the freedom of individual here, right? Apart from that, equality. Now, if you remember the Declaration of the Rights of Man, in that we have heard these terms, we have learned about these terms, right? So, equality, it means that everyone should be equal in front of law, everyone should be born free and be treated as equals in society. Fraternity, that is feeling of brotherhood, friendship and having some mutual respect, right? So everyone should live together and they should respect each other, they should live like brothers, they should have equal respect for each other, right? So here these are the three terms, three principles or ideas, let's say, these were the watchwords of the French Revolution. Now students, liberty, equality and fraternity. By now, you must know that our Indian Constitution has adopted these three terms as well in the preamble, that is the introduction of our Indian Constitution. So definitely you can relate with this point that I've been trying to say time and again here, that French Revolution, it inspired many other regions in order to fight the oppressive regime, be it the other parts of Europe or be it the other parts or in this whole world that we are talking about. It also inspired the struggling nations of Asia and Africa who were colonized by the British. Definitely students. Now you have heard about the colonial rule in India. Whenever we are talking about the colonial rule, we are talking about the British Empire that ruled India for almost 200 years, right? So many other regions, not only India, but many other parts of Asia, many other regions in Asia and Africa as well, these were the colonies of British Empire. And all these people who were living in these regions, they were also inspired by these watchwords. And definitely they rose against the oppressive British rule, right, in their respective regions. Now, the ideas of liberty and democratic rights were the most important legacy of the French Revolution. Definitely. These were the ideas that everyone wanted to endure. It had a long-lasting impact on the people, like people who were suffering the oppressive rule of the British Empire or any other autocratic rule there, right? So here we can say that liberty and democratic rights. So definitely people were now fighting for their basic rights. And whenever we are talking about our country specifically, that is India's struggle for freedom or independence, it was also inspired by the ideas of great French philosophers, that is Voltaire and Rousseau. Now, do you remember what Voltaire said or what Rousseau said? Yes, students. So they were totally against the whole idea of monarchy or absolute monarchy, right? Rousseau, he also wrote a book, Social Contract. When we are talking about Voltaire, he made mockery, he wrote satirical novels, right? Candide was the name that you must remember. We have already talked about the intellectual awakening part. So these ideas that were now taught by Voltaire and Rousseau, they inspired the philosophers or the reformers in India as well. When we are talking about the India's struggle for independence. So you can see that how are we trying to relate the repercussions or the ideas that were propagated by the French Revolution to the other parts of the world. How are we trying to relate it? And in fact, talking about our own country's struggle of independence. Now, best examples of the reformers that we are talking about, here we can say that Raja Ram Mohan Roy. Now, students, when you will learn about the great social reformers of our own country, India, you will hear the name Raja Ram Mohan Roy. He was a great social reformer who fought for a lot of social evils that existed in our society, right? He wanted to transform the society, right, from the social injustice that people were facing. So he was also very much influenced by the ideas of Voltaire and Rousseau. Apart from this, Tipu Sultan. Yes, students. Now, if you have heard the name of Mysore, right? Now, you will learn this or you have learned about this in your previous classes when we are talking about the British rule in India, when they were trying to establish themselves in India, right? Here, Tipu Sultan again is a famous name. He was the freedom fighter, let's say, who was fighting for his own region, Mysore, right, to free themselves from the British rule, right? So, when we are talking about Tipu Sultan, you would be amazed to know that he was also very much inspired by the Jacobin Club. You have learned about Jacobin Club here, right? So, he was a French ally, supporters of them, and apart from this, he also had sword Tree of Liberty, right, to signify the friendship here. So these are the two examples that you must remember. Just extra information that I am trying to give here. The French Revolution also gave the theory that sovereignty comes from the people, that is from below and not above. Yes, students, very important point here. The idea of sovereignty, that is supreme authority, supreme authority of whom? Of the head of the state. Of the head of the state. So basically, the head had the supreme authority. But who is giving this supreme authority? The people who are electing this head. So definitely the sovereignty, the theory comes from people, that is the below, right? The above here represents the powerful people, below is the common people. So the common people, they are electing their head and definitely they are giving him the supreme authority to rule. Okay, students? It also marked the beginning of active and institutionalized mass participation in the government. Definitely. We can definitely understand this point while we talked about the different stages of the French Revolution. So people participated in the French Revolution, right? And also in the government as well. The formation of National Assembly, right? When they drafted the constitution, right? And the passive citizens, the active citizens, they were indirectly electing the National Assembly and they were checking the powers of the king. Basically, the constitution was formed in order to limit the powers of the king here when we are talking about the French Revolution. So, active participation of the people, of the masses is really important here. Revolution, it also led to many isms. Now here, very important point, so you must understand it clearly. Now when we are talking about French Revolution, students, the story does not end here. In fact, a new story starts after this in Europe and elsewhere. Right, students? So when we are talking about the French Revolution, it led to the rise of many other concepts, many other theories. The first one and the foremost important point here is the idea of nationalism that you are going to learn in your senior class. Then the idea of liberalism, and last one is the idea of socialism that you are going to learn in your next chapter only. Okay. So one by one, we are going to understand these three isms, that is nationalism, liberalism and socialism. Okay, so let us try to understand that. Now when we are talking about nationalism, the term nationalism, what do you understand by it? Now when you will go in class 10, students, you will learn about the rise of nationalism in Europe. But what do we understand by this idea? And how did this idea come into mind of these people? So it led to many new nations emerging in Europe, Asia and Africa. So like I told you, students, that people who were being colonized, who were the colonies of the British Empire, they were under the rule of the British Empire, right? They were not living as people and they did not have a sense that they are living in a nation, a common territory that was theirs, right? The whole idea, the whole administration was under someone else's hands. So here, the idea of nation or the feeling of nationalism is very important. French Revolution gave the rise to this feeling of nationalism, not only in Europe, but the regions of Asia and Africa as well. A nation now comprised citizens who inhabited a common territory, possessed a voice in their common government, and were conscious of their common heritage and interests. Now, in simple terms, if I have to explain this whole idea of nationalism, we can say that this was a feeling or a sense of belongingness towards the nation. And this sense of belongingness, how this can come? By sharing common culture, by sharing common heritage, right? Finding something common, a common link between the people, right? So the people who are living in a common territory, they are sharing some common culture, they are sharing some common heritage, language that they are speaking, right? The way that they are living, all these, they comprise to form a nation. The citizens who are living in it, they belong to that particular nation. And the whole idea, it only emerged after the French Revolution. So, rise of nationalism in Europe is very important point, and you are going to learn it later on in class 10th, right? For now, you have to understand how it came after the French Revolution, because people, they were now getting aware about a lot of things. Now they were connecting themselves with one another, fighting for a common cause. Very important, right? Sense of belongingness, this point is very important, right? Therefore, they are going to fight for a common cause, okay? The second ism here is liberalism. Liberalism. So you have heard the term liberty. When we are talking about liberalism, what does that mean? So it meant emancipation of the individual from class, corporate or governmental restraint. So here it is freedom. In simple terms, right? In simple terms, just understand that it is the freedom of individuals. Now, when we are talking about the term liberalism, it has different meanings in different spheres. If we are talking about liberalism in political sphere, it means that everyone should be equal before law, right? Everyone should have the right to vote, right? So in political sphere, it means this. Now, when we are talking about the economical sphere here, it means that freedom from the governmental restraints, right? So here we see that basic idea of liberalism is freedom of individuals, right? So it was asserted in the Declaration of the Rights of Man that was issued in 1789. We saw that the whole idea of liberalism, the whole idea of liberty, freedom was emphasized here. The next point is that Declaration stressed that all men are to be treated as equal before law. Yes, the most important point here, everyone should be treated as equals. It has guided many newly independent nations to frame their constitution based on same principles. Yes, now do you see the legacy that is being formed here, right? The ideas that have been taken by many other newly independent nations, right? Now these nations, they are also trying to inculcate the basic principles of liberalism, of equality, of fraternity, right? All these important principles are being inculcated by them in their own constitution. The last point here is socialism. Socialism, the last ism that we are going to talk about is socialism here. Now, what do you understand by socialism? And I told you that you are going to learn about socialism in your next chapter. So, in your next chapter, students, you are going to learn about the Russian Revolution. Okay? So, here, what is this socialism? So it is a philosophy, a principle that was emphasized or that came after the French Revolution that emphasizes the community and its collective welfare. So when we are talking about socialism, you must understand one point, that people who propagated this theory, they were against private ownership of the property. So basically, they believe that the property should be in the hands of all rather than being in the hands of only few people, against the capitalism, against the whole idea of capitalism, right? Private ownership. So they believe that this is the social root of all the social evils in society, right? So it was their duty to remove this social evil from the society. They believed in collective ownership rather than private ownership. Okay. So they promoted a society that was based on collective well-being rather than individual profit. Okay. So this is an important theory that you have to learn in your next chapter as well. So these were the three isms that we can see after the French Revolution. Now coming to the exercise section here, we have a question that says, the French Revolution led to many isms, explain. Now here we have just talked about the three isms. So what you have to do? I'm just telling you the point here. You have to talk about nationalism that we have discussed it right now. Then you have to talk about liberalism. So in nationalism, you can say that the feeling that arose after the French Revolution, right, in Europe and some other regions of Asia and Africa. So a sense of belongingness towards a place, or people who are living in a common territory, sharing common culture, heritage. So all these points have to be mentioned in the idea of nationalism. Liberalism, where you have to talk about the freedom of individual, and also you have to explain that how this has been emphasized in the Declaration of the Rights of Man, right? From governmental restraints, corporate society, and all those things you have to mention here in liberalism that we have already talked about. The third here is socialism that we just have discussed. So against the idea of private ownership, and they believed in collective well-being. So here students, you just have to remember these keywords. If you are remembering these keywords, you can form a sentence and you can write your answer very nicely here. So just remember the keywords that I have mentioned in these points. So this is how you are going to frame your answer. Talking about the three isms, mention the legacy of the French Revolution. Now when we are talking about the legacy of the French Revolution, definitely there are a lot of points that you have learned. So it influenced, first point that we have to talk about is the influence of French Revolution on different regions. French Revolution on different regions, let's say giving the examples of Germans, Italians, Austrians who fought against the oppressive regime, right? We can also talk about the influence it had on the India's struggle for freedom or independence, and also the other nations such as of Asia and Africa who were colonized. The idea of liberty, fraternity, and equality that became the watchwords of the French Revolution, and how these were being adopted by other nations. These ideas, they were now being included or inculcated by these newly independent nations. You can also talk about it as well. You can also give the examples of social reformers in India such as Rajaram Mohan Roy, who were, and Tipu Sultan as well. He was not a social reformer, but he was a fighter, right? He was the leader here in Mysore king. So they were influenced by the ideas of Voltaire and Rousseau. So you can talk about this as well in this answer. So this is how you have to form the answer. You can also talk about the ideas, the isms that French Revolution has led to, talk about nationalism, talk about socialism, talk about liberalism, and explain them in brief. So this is the complete answer. Now students, we have completed our first chapter, that is the French Revolution. A lot of points have been discussed in the chapter. When did the French Revolution take place? How was the French society like before the revolution, after the revolution, course of the revolution, causes of the revolution, last but not the least, the legacy of the revolution, right? And we are going to understand how it had impacted the other regions and how these regions they started fighting against the oppressive rule, right? So that's for this chapter here. Thank you very much.